Hello, Dog Nation. Welcome into Go with the Flow, presented by RS Andrews. Our weekly look at the top games in the upcoming weekend from a point spread perspective. We'll give you our picks here in a moment. An entire collection of our Dog Nation colleagues, plus Dari Payro from RS Andrews on hand to make the picks here today. Going to be a fun show. Pretty interesting week here, and obviously a major showdown for the Georgia Bulldogs inside Sanford Stadium as they host number 5 Ole Miss, setting up for a gigantic day between the hedges. Before we give you a look at our standings and how we did last week, let's say hello to Dari Payro. Dari, great week for you a week ago. How are you feeling about the upcoming slate of games here for this particular Saturday?
Slightly better than I did last week. Last week was still iffy. This week is, slightly better. Slightly better.
Well, we'll see how that goes. Certainly the hot hand here right now, far hotter than me. I can say that for sure. In fact, let's go back and relive last week. Jeff Sintel, the only one for the moment over, at 500 for the year after a 3-3 week last week. Mike Griffith does go 5-1. Dari Payro, as we said, winning week last week at 4-2. That puts Dari and Mike at 17-19. I'm right there with them at 17-19 on the year. 2-4 week for me last week. Connor, same as that. That puts him at 16-20 on the campaign. And Kaylee Manziel, rough go of it last week, 1-5, makes her 15-21 on the year. Now, listen, look, here's how I feel about my own picks, and I'm sure everybody else will have their own version of this. I feel like as time goes on, my tried and true way of looking at this will start to pay some dividends. I hope. We just need somebody in the group here to get up above the 50-50 mark and get above that 53% mark and give you a chance to make some profit on that if you're playing this as a normal side bet. So we just need somebody to get on up there, and this week would be a great chance for that to happen. By the way, before we get into this week's picks, let's also remind you that all the action here is brought to you by RS Andrews. We call the show Go with the Flow. We're getting into that time of year where the heat's about to be flowing through your vents, the hot water flowing through your shower each and every day, and if things at your house aren't quite flowing the way they're supposed to, well, our friends at RS Andrews can take care of that for you. They'll put a smile on your face, story after story. That's what they've been doing. They can do that for you as well for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Showing up on time, doing the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what RS Andrews is all about. We've been thrilled to be able to do this show with our friends at RS Andrews, including Dari Payro, for a good number of years, and obviously we're having a great time here once again in 2025 as well. How much fun are the Georgia Bulldogs having? Well, I guess it depends on if you're talking about the first half or the second half. Obviously, two very different teams. That was true last week again in the win for Georgia against Auburn. This week, hoping for more of a four-quarter performance, though, as they host the Ole Miss Rebels. Interesting situation here where Georgia is the number 9 team in America. Ole Miss ranked better than Georgia at number 5, and yet it's Georgia who is the, I'd call it, fairly sizable favorite here. 7.5-point spread sees Georgia hosting Ole Miss. Georgia not exactly taking care of business here at home, just 1-3 against the spread in home games thus far this year. Ole Miss 2-1 its last 3 SEC contests. Of course, this is to a degree a revenge game for Georgia after the Rebels beat Georgia in Oxford last year, and in the rain and the muck and the mire, a bunch of Rebel students stormed the field and had a big celebration. Of course, in 2023, it was a blowout Georgia win on a November night there at Sanford Stadium. For the third consecutive year, it's Georgia and Ole Miss playing now semi-yearly, a throwback to my childhood when Ole Miss and Georgia were playing each and every year. In this particular case, though, we see the Georgia Bulldogs as a 7.5-point favorite. Our Mike Griffith is away today. Cody Chaffins has Mike's picks. So in the role of Mike Griffith, we'll turn to Cody Chaffins.
Yeah, I'm assuming Mike, with his new system, he left me the notes about what he wants to pick this week. He does remind everybody this new system Mike's on. He is now 10-2, so I just assume he's at the Overwater Villa in Tahiti this week celebrating that. He has given me his picks, though, and for this one, he is going to take Georgia minus the points. He said it did start at 6.5, now a 7.5-point game. He sees it more 2023 Georgia Ole Miss, less 2024. He says it's going to be a 2-touchdown win for the Dogs. Mike, heavy on Georgia.
Well, there you go. Technically, probably started at 5.5, but by the time we got to press time here for this show, we are up at around 7.5. So a lot of movement in the direction of Georgia. So, Jeff, you hear Cody, by way of Mike, making the pick. A lot of love for Georgia from him. What about for you?
Here's my new system. I think that's too many points. I like Georgia to win, but I like Ole Miss to cover with that right there. So like, I can't take the 7.5. That's too steep for my blood. And sometimes I do this just so I can see the mental gymnastics that happens with Connor when he sees a split from me and Mike.
Speaking of a split, Jeff's got his bowling shirt on today. You love to see that in honor of the Chick-fil-A Dog Bowl coming up next week. Jeff's already dressed and ready for it. Connor Riley, as Jeff said, the ball is now in your court.
Yeah, I'd like to inquire about the investigation that Kirby Smart called for after Gunnar Stockton scored that late touchdown last week that prevented Auburn from covering that number. I haven't heard anything on that, and I'd like to know where that is going. But I'm going to ride with Ole Miss here. This is a classic emotional hedge where, look, if this game is close, then I end up being right. And if I am wrong, that means Georgia wins by a fairly comfortable margin here. And I think everyone will be pretty happy with that. So give me the Rebels here plus 7.5.
So a little bit more love on the Rebels thus far than I expected to hear. Kaylee Manziel, are you in on that too?
Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. I don't
Wow.
feel like this Georgia defense has showed enough to justify such a big number. So I'm going to go the safe route here and take Ole Miss just because that is a lot of points.
Okay, so a couple of things to unpack here. It's worth noting when it comes to this particular line, this is very different than other Georgia point spreads that we've seen against SEC opponents this year. Georgia, fairly narrow road favorite at Tennessee to begin its SEC slate, despite the fact that Georgia had really dominated the Vols, including there in Knoxville. Odds makers turned out to be right. Same thing against Alabama, where Georgia was a smaller favorite against the Crimson Tide when the game went off. Smaller than it was back during the summer when the look-ahead lines were first posted. Clearly, that turned out to be right. Georgia lost outright as a favorite against the Crimson Tide there. Also, last week, slightly above a field goal number for Georgia. They did cover the spread, but this was with Auburn coming off 2 straight SEC losses. Odds makers still not deeming to make Georgia a very big favorite for an Auburn team that was struggling at least a little bit. By comparison, much more love in favor of Georgia here right now. 5.5 to begin the week, bigger than some thought. It has moved since then. Talk to our friends from BetMGM. They'll tell you in games like this, where you've got a top 25 matchup with one team favored, especially when you've got like 4 through 25, not excluding the top 3 here, 4 through 25, numbers around where Georgia is and less, 8.5 and below. You're talking about the favored team covering 60% of the time. That's even more true when the lower ranked team is the one that's actually favored here. Also, Georgia, if you want to look at SEC play at home for the Dogs, not a surprise. Not typically we think of as a great spread team. Georgia just 8-8 in SEC home games dating back to its national championship era, the start of the 2021 season. But it's fair to point out that most of those games were actually back when Georgia would be commonly a 30-plus point favorite at home against even SEC teams. In the only 3 games you can find where the point spread is at least somewhat similar to what it is on Saturday, there was, of course, the loss to Alabama last week. I'll grant you that. Prior to that, though, you're talking about Tennessee last season when Georgia was an 8.5-point favorite, won easily, 31-17. Ole Miss in 2023, 11.5-point favorite, won in blowout fashion, 52-17. Go back to Tennessee 2022, 9.5-point favorite, at least a similar spread to what it'll be on Saturday. Georgia also won compared to the spread with some ease, 27-13. So believe it or not, after expressing a good bit of skepticism, at least from a point spread perspective, on Georgia for the last few weeks, I'm going to trust the odds makers here. I like Georgia minus the 7.5 points. I think this is the best performance of the season to date for Georgia coming on Saturday. The flow, though, is on the side of Ole Miss. Dar, you want to go with the flow and say hotty toddy plus the points with the Rebels?
I'm going to stay away from Roy Munson. I'm not getting Munson. Centel can keep his bowling outfit over there. This line makes no sense, unless you're Vegas, because it's screaming, take Ole Miss here. They are begging people to take it. Ole Miss is undefeated. They've looked great. Georgia struggled. They barely win. They timeout, no timeout. I'm clapping. I'm going to take the Dogs. They're going to control both lines of scrimmage in this game. They're going to absolutely dominate the trenches. Ole Miss has no match for that. Georgia's going to be able to run the ball better than they've ran all year long against this porous run D from Ole Miss. They can't throw the ball because Ole Miss's secondary is pretty good, but they're going to be able to run it at will. I like maybe it eclipses 300 yards rushing
Wow.
for Georgia. I don't know if there's a total on that. I would take the over for the team rushing total. I absolutely love them to pound it and control the clock. And Georgia's defense, has kind of not looked like defenses of old, of how dominant they are up front, but they are going to look dominant in this game because they match up perfectly against what Ole Miss wants to do running the ball. They're going to take them out of it. They're going to be one-dimensional. For Ole Miss to stay in this game, they're going to have to beat Georgia downfield passing a lot. And so when you add those things up, with Georgia being able to just control the clock and run the ball and make an Ole Miss one-dimensional, I absolutely love Georgia to easily cover this number.
I'll tell you this, Dari's been hotter than me with his pick, so I'm happy to have him on my side on this one. We'll stay in SEC play as we move on. Here's the Vanderbilt Commodores get ready to play host to the LSU Tigers. Vandy in the rare position of being favored in this game against a top 10 ranked team. Vandy's been pretty good at home too, 2-1 against the spread so far as a home favorite here this season. LSU by comparison wins last week against South Carolina 20-10. But certainly seems on the verge of disappointing preseason expectations here. 1-1 against ranked opponents thus far this season. The number sees the Commodores favored by 2.5. Of course, we haven't seen Vandy in 2 weeks. Last time we saw them, game that's probably a little closer than the final margin would have indicated in a loss at Alabama. But it's Vanderbilt hosting LSU. Commodores favored by 2.5. Cody Chavins, we come back to you in the role of Mike Griffith here today. What does Mike want to do with the Commodores?
Well, here's the sad truth here. Mike sent me a long email detailing all of his picks, except for this one. I don't know if he got lost at the swim-up bar or what. We were going to make a pick for Mike today, and I get to break out my knowledge here. So I think, Mike, we'll go with LSU. He likes Brian Kelly getting some points there, so he's going to go LSU.
Yeah, Mike not usually a huge taker of underdogs, so that's probably, if we're doing trial by combat here, Cody in for Mike, that's probably a pick that Mike sounds like he would have made, laying some wood on the road, typically what he might do. Jeff Sintel, how about for you?
Yeah, lots of thought bubbles swirling through my head on this one. Like, what's rarer than a fair state Bulldog coming to Athens to play in the Georgia Ole Miss game? What about that stats where Vanderbilt is favored against a top 10 team? Have to go a long way back for that. The ESPN FPI has both of these teams with the exact rating. The line obviously tells you a lot because you're supposed to get at least 3 points for being at home. I do like Vanderbilt to cover this. I believe we had it at 1.5 or 2.5. I do believe Vanderbilt will cover this spread because I don't have a lot of faith in LSU right now. But it's very weird times when you see Vanderbilt hosting a top 10 team at home and they are favored.
Yeah, 2.5 is the number for this particular game here. Pretty much, I think, painted to a 2.5 cross here right now. And while Jeff is right, commonly think of point spread, or I should say home field advantage being worth 3 points. Vanderbilt probably, even in this improved era, probably not a 3-point. Oh, so Mike has texted back. He is taking the Vanderbilt Commodores. So all this happening very much on the fly here right now. So we'll switch Mike from LSU to Vandy. Rare underdog take from him. And just to finish my point before I yield to Connor, probably not a full 3-point advantage for Vanderbilt while playing at home, even in this era of obviously improved play. Typically speaking, lots of road fans in the building there, and Vandy not a great history at home. So probably not a full 3 points for a Vanderbilt. And plus, a full 3 points is a little bit less commonly found than it once was. Connor Riley, to you here with Vandy favored by 2.5.
Yeah, it appears since everyone else wants to take the maximum allotted time, I'll just make this quick. Jeff and Mike have both taken Vanderbilt. I'm going to take LSU here and go against them.
Kaylee Menzel, how about for you?
LSU has not scored more than 20 points on any Power 4 opponent that they've played this year, but yet are still somehow in the mix for a potential SEC championship game and maybe a playoff contender. But I think that this becomes the turning point for LSU and we start questioning Brian Kelly's career again, because I think that Vanderbilt has a really good offensive line. And just looking at the things that LSU struggles with, I think Vegas got it right with the favorite. So I'm also going to take Vanderbilt.
Yeah, listen, I think Vanderbilt's good. The game against Alabama 2 weeks ago showed me a lot. Obviously, when it's all said and done, it looked like a more comfortable margin for Alabama than I think those who actually watched the game probably thought it really was. Vandy had some chances there early. Plus, for a team now trying to bounce back from loss, that's something that Vanderbilt did pretty well a year ago. The win straight up against Alabama last season came after 2 straight losses. The Auburn win last year on the road for Vanderbilt came after a loss to Texas. This is a team that has shaken off, you call it poor play, just a loss in some cases, and found a way to get back on it. I think this is a Vandy team that in some form or fashion hangs around all year long. I like them here, minus the 2.5 against an LSU team that I remain pretty suspicious of. So give me the Commodores here in this spot. That puts the flow on the side of Vanderbilt. Do I want to go with the flow and take Vandy?
This is the first time that the Commodores have been favored against LSU since 1948. It's also the first time that they've been favored versus a ranked opponent since 1978. That's 176 straight games against ranked opponents where they've been an underdog. There's all kinds of firsts that come out in this game. If they beat LSU and win this game, it will be the first time in school's history, that they have 2 wins against top 15 ranked teams. So all these things are lined up for them to have a bounce back game against LSU. I'm going to take a flyer on them to cover this number because it doesn't get easier for them. They got 2 road games at Missouri and Texas after this. So let the good times roll in Nashville, and the Commodores going to get this cover.
So there you go for Dari Payro. Staying in SEC play here for when we turn our attention to the 3rd Saturday in October as the Alabama Crimson Tide get ready to host the Tennessee Vols. Big stretch of ranked opponents for Alabama continues with Tennessee coming in. Vols, of course, have recent history on their side. Winners outright against Alabama in 2 of the last 3 games. Of course, both those wins for Tennessee happened in the friendly confines of Neyland Stadium. This one's slated to take place at Bryant-Denny. Alabama slipped past Missouri last week. Tennessee had to do the same thing, by the way, against Arkansas. The number here, 8.5. Alabama favored over the Tennessee Vols. We go back to Cody Chafin's pinch hitting for Mike today. Cody, what does Mike want to do with 3rd Saturday here?
Well, here's the thing, Mike, things that concern him. Jim Miller knocked out of that game against Missouri. He's their toughest guy. Did not like that. You mentioned the tough stretch for Alabama. All of these games in a row, Georgia, Vanderbilt, Missouri. Now it's Tennessee. At least they get Tennessee at home. But for that reason, he thinks the Vols, they may not be with the Stogies after the game, but he likes Tennessee plus the points this week.
Yeah, 8.5 to me seems like a really big number. Jeff Sintel, what about for you?
Guys, I think that's probably going to be the theme of this panel for this right now. I think that is just too rich for my blood. I do think Alabama wins. I think they won't look as pretty in doing so. 8.5, give me the Vols. I think I like that advantage there with the points.
How about you, Connor? Too many points for you?
Roll Tide.
Well, there you go. Kaylee Mansell, how about for you?
I can't believe that Connor just said that. Okay. I'm taking Tennessee. It's as simple as that. I think they might be tired. They've had a really tough stretch of games. I like them to win, but I like it to be maybe like a 3-point game. So I'm going to take Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm going to take Tennessee here as well for the same reason I just mentioned a moment ago. I just think 8.5 sounds like a lot of points. Now, listen, Alabama's been very impressive, but sometimes that also creates a problem for you, too. 4 weeks in a row of handling ranked opponents. Georgia on the road, coming home and getting a hard fight from Vanderbilt, then going back on the road to Missouri. 8.5, you can be well within inside that margin, still win the game. Obviously, I would be pretty surprised if Tennessee were to beat Alabama, but also not shocked either. I think this is a game where maybe the Crimson Tide get just a bit of a heat check, and I'll take Tennessee plus the points. That puts the flow on the side of the Vols as well. Do you want to go with the flow and take Tennessee plus 8.5 in this classic rivalry game?
Alabama plays best at home, but I like Tennessee to cover this number. It's too many points.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the theme there. That was a spread when I first saw it. It was a little bit surprising to me, although I'm sure plenty of people know something I don't know as it relates to that. Staying in SEC play here as well, we travel back to a spot the Georgia fans certainly got their fill of this past Saturday. Jordan-Hare Stadium will be the home as the Auburn Tigers get ready to host the Missouri Tigers. Of course, we told you Missouri last week fought hard, but eventually lost at home to Alabama. They are 3-2, though, in the role of favorites here this season against the spread. That's where they'll be on the road against Auburn on Saturday. Auburn, listen, in its two previous losses, now 1-1 on the spread. Coming off those, now 3-3 on the year after losing to Georgia 20-10 last week. It's also been a very weird week on the Plains with a player opt-out or being kicked off the team, however you want to describe that. And obviously the aftermath of what they view as controversy from the Georgia-Auburn game last week. But at home, Auburn getting 1.5 points as Missouri comes to call. Cody Chaffins, on behalf of Mike Griffith, what's the pick here for Auburn hosting Missouri?
I think just to frustrate Connor, he just wrote Tigers. So no, I'm just kidding.
He better not have.
He gave me a little bit of info. He says first half was not a mirage last week. He said Auburn tough to beat in Jordan-Hare, so he's going to go Auburn plus the 1.5 points.
So Mike on the side of Auburn. Jeff Sintel, what about you? The homestanding Tigers getting 1.5 points here.
I think Cam Newton was the guest last week at Jordan-Hare. I think maybe the Grim Reaper or maybe Jimmy Sexton with a buyout might be the guest this week. We talked about that was too much. Well, this is not enough for Auburn at home with Mizzou. Give me the Tigers there.
You mean you're taking Missouri on the road, right?
Missouri on the road, correct.
Thank you very much. Connor Riley, how about for you?
I think this Auburn team is dead. I think part of them died in the second half of that game against Georgia, and I think they hear things about Hugh Freeze and they start wondering things. You saw the Damari Alston news this week, which I don't think was particularly handled all that well from Auburn's point of view. Give me Missouri here to get off the mat and find a way to go into Jordan-Hare Stadium and get a win just like the Georgia Bulldogs did a week ago.
For what it's worth, agree with almost every word that Connor just said. Kaylee Manziel, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that Connor said it best. This is an Auburn team that is clearly defeated. I think that Hugh Freeze really gave up on coaching that team in the second half. And I know it feels like Auburn is due up for a win, but that's a program that's got a lot of internal issues right now. I think Missouri is a decent football team, so I'm going to take Missouri.
Yeah, so listen, I think Kaylee's right about that too. I like Missouri. I feel the same way about Missouri that I felt about Vanderbilt. They showed me a lot in losing to Alabama. This Missouri defense, I think, is pretty game. I think that Pribble has been a really good quarterback for them. I think Missouri's a pretty good team, and Pribble is a far better quarterback than Jackson Arnold is. And to further the point we're making about Auburn, look, a couple of times a year this happens where you have a chance to get in on the ground floor. Eventually, I believe the point spreads are going to start catching up to this. I think that Auburn is done, totally done. Obviously, the aftermath of the Georgia game is part of that. But as Connor said, the Alston thing around Auburn was not handled well this week. Hugh Freeze is a lot of things. A PR mastermind, probably not one of those things. And I just think it's really bad PR for Auburn. There's been a lot of Auburn player stuff on social media this week. There's just not much to rally around on Auburn. And if you want to get in on a good price, kind of buy low on a team that's probably tapping out on the season, that's my assumption of what Auburn is. And so not only do I like Missouri on the road, this one I could see being ugly. I could see Missouri winning with margin. And in future weeks, I believe point spreads catch up to this. But for this week, I think you get Missouri at a pretty big discount for an Auburn team that just does not want to be here. Dari, that puts the flow on the side of MIZZOU. You want to go with the flow and take Mizzou.
Yeah, 100%. I think losing to Missouri here is the final nail in the coffin for Freeze. I think it seals it. And I don't think they have fight until November 29th when they get the Tide coming into Jordan-Hare. I think they're checked out until then.
I think that's a good point. You could see them be back and live again for a game against Alabama, but this panel in pretty strong agreement here that you may not get from much from Auburn over the course of the next few weeks. And obviously, I am right there with all of you on that. I will remind you that coming up in the Friday edition of Dog Nation Daily and the conclusion of the broadcast with our R.S. Andrews cool down, we have an outstanding pick to make and what I think is going to be a really fun rivalry game that may be leaving our lives at some point in time. USC's been red hot. They're hosting, or I should say they're being hosted by Notre Dame. Fun game between USC and Notre Dame. We'll give you our official pick for that at the conclusion of the Friday edition of Dog Nation Daily and our R.S. Andrews cool down. I think you'll really enjoy that one. There are playoff implications perhaps for both teams and certainly ramifications for the SEC teams hoping to have more playoff spots involving whatever happens in Notre Dame. So we'll give you our thoughts on that rivalry game coming up on Friday. And before we give you our final pick for this show, let me also remind you that all of this, as we said before, brought to you by R.S. Andrews. This is one of my favorite times of year because it's cool in the morning and it gets a little warmer in the afternoon. I like to experience both within the same day, but those cool mornings are also a precursor to what's going to be eventually a cold weather winter season. So as you get ready for the heating system to be cranked up and getting ready for that winter that's on its way, our friends at R.S. Andrews want to help you do that. And you can get your heating system tuned back up to factory fresh specs. One of these days, you're going to need a new unit. But this winter, you may be able to get some new life out of your old unit, and it may only cost you $99 to get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. So check out more online, R.S. Andrews at rsandrews.com. For our final pick today, we'll step outside the SEC and step outside a traditional top 25 matchup. It is ranked Georgia Tech on the road at Wallace Wade Stadium, who, by the way, won a national championship as the head coach of Alabama. But Wallace Wade Stadium in Durham, North Carolina, with 4-2 Duke hosting Georgia Tech. And the thing to know here, perhaps surprising to some, it's actually Duke that's the small favorite in this game. A 1.5 favorite for Duke here at home. They were off last week. Tech continues to be impressive. 6-0 on the season, winning with some comfort last week against Virginia Tech. Of course, this is the first time since 2011. The Yellow Jackets have started 6-0. On the other side of things, Duke 3-3 against the spread here this season, playing in Durham there on Saturday. Cody Chavins, we come back to you, picking for Mike Griffith. What does Mike want to do with Tech on the road as a small underdog?
Mike's beside himself. He cannot believe the insult that has been leveled at Haynes King and Brent Key, this Georgia Tech team going on the road as underdogs. He's going to take the Jackets over Duke. He would even go money line on this. Brandon, he says you know all about Duke disappointing in home games.
Well,
I don't know if that's a reference to something or.
Well, when we took Duke, they disappointed on the road. They were disappointed on the road when we took them. Or we went against them and they blasted us on the road. That's what it was with our best bet a couple of weeks ago. But not surprising that Mike jumps on the side of Georgia Tech right there. Jeff Sintel, Tech is getting a 1.5 here, undefeated and ranked, but a small underdog against the Blue Devils. What about for you?
I think most people look at Tech and they wonder when that Rambling Wreck, I believe it's a Model A, perhaps a Model T, forgive me for not knowing institutional knowledge about the Jackets. Most people think there's a game in the ACC where Georgia Tech leaks the oil and they just look bad and they have a poor performance. Guys, I've been kind of looking for that the last couple of weeks. I haven't seen it. I don't see them doing it against a pretty good team in Duke this week. I think Tech win. I think Tech covers that.
So a lot of love here for Georgia Tech here right now. Connor, Tech on the road. Duke's the favorite. What do you think?
Hold on, Jeff. Did Georgia Tech not just get a bogus offside call that didn't get called against them to have them come back and beat Wake, I believe, in overtime? Correct? Like Tech, these things happen in a reason. This game is why casinos get built. Everyone in the world is going to pick Georgia Tech. They're a great story. Kaylee Manziel's picks haven't been great, but one of the things that she nailed to a T in the preseason is that Georgia Tech was going to be a playoff team. And yet I still think they're going to be able to do that with a 10-2 record. And I think this is the loss that gets them. So give me Duke here at home at that number.
So there you go. Connor on the side of Duke. Kaylee Manziel, how about for you? You got the call out there from Connor. What do you think?
Yeah, thanks for the backhanded compliment. I'm looking more at the compliment than the insult, so I'll take it. I want to go back to something that Jeff said, which it feels like we're waiting on a Georgia Tech upset at some point. And back when I made the prediction for Georgia Tech to make the playoff, I had pointed out that Clemson would be the toughest team. And then I thought that the other upset that they could potentially have would be when they play Syracuse next week, similar to what Syracuse did to Miami at the end of last year. I could see that being Syracuse. I don't have it as Duke. So I'm going to take Georgia Tech in this game. But next week, I would be really careful about taking Georgia Tech.
Okay, so who did you take, Haley? I'm sorry.
I'm taking Georgia Tech.
Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, and obviously a little bit of a look ahead there in that particular spot too. Listen, I'm taking Duke as well, for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is this, and I got no problem saying this. Obviously, I'm a Georgia guy, but I got no problem saying this. Tech's been pretty impressive this season. Not the way game, as Connor pointed out, but you know what? Last week, in a game like Virginia Tech, where previously in the Brent Key era, they've actually struggled against unranked teams. Last week, for the most part, they were fairly comfortable in beating Virginia Tech. That's not something they would have typically done, where they've shown up for ranked opponents, not quite so much for the lesser teams. Right now, Tech's mostly beating everybody. But a week after a home win in the conference with some margin, now going on the road, which is expected to be a much closer game, to say they're also going to now step up and win that game too, now you're describing one of the truly better teams in the country, a team befitting the current ranking that Tech has. And I got to pump the brakes on that just a little bit. I'm not quite ready to put Tech in that category. They're improved. They're clearly deserving of being ranked, and they're at least a fringe playoff contender. But what we're talking about going on the road and following up 6-0 start with a road win at Duke, now we're putting them into an upper tier category where I simply can't have them. And I'll say this because I've complimented them enough. I think Darian Mintz is the better quarterback in this game. For all the love that Haynes King gets, Darian Mintz is the better quarterback. So I got the home team. I got the better quarterback. I like Duke to win and cover against Georgia Tech on Saturday. That puts the flow on the Blue Devils as well. Dar, you want to go with the flow and take Duke? No, it doesn't. Flow's on Tech. You want to go with the flow and take Tech?
Yeah, the flow's on Tech. I mean, I'm taking Tech. I'm rolling with the Jackets here, and the difference for me is I give the edge to the coach. I think Key's a much better coach, and I think when he goes against, I'm not sold on Duke being that good of a team. They have the high offense. But when Key has gone against that, he's been very good at dissecting and scheming and game planning. I think, and I really like Georgia Tech's defense. I think that's kind of underrated talk throughout the year for them. I think they have a really solid defense, and I think they're going to be able to make some key stops in this game. And that's going to be the difference of this game. And that's going to be the difference of Georgia Tech winning this game. And it's all going to go back to Brent Key and all the things that he's done to prepare for this game. And that's how they're going to win it.
I think this is a fun football game, and it would certainly be telling if Dari turns out to be right and some of our other panelists who said something similar. You go up on the road, a little bit of a sleepy atmosphere oftentimes at Durham, but still it's a road game. You get that win, you get to 7-0. That's a real thing for Tech that would make them certainly a much larger national story than they have been to this point. So hope you'll come back and join us on Friday, the conclusion of the broadcast for Dog Nation Daily, and our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll give you our official pick for a big rivalry game between USC and Notre Dame, plus our best bets from across the landscape of college football. That's always a lot of fun. If nothing else, you can laugh at me for how bad some of them might have been. They've been horrendous thus far this year. We'll do that with you on Friday. For your own picks, I wish you best of luck. Enjoy the games. We'll see you back next week at this same time for Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. We'll look forward to talking to you then.